story. Okay, so uh, we're talking about a particular situation to where we feel blamed or that someone is blaming us, and that we may or may not know why they are blaming us. But the fact is that we do not generally in our society do we like blamed. We kind of avoid it. Don't blame me is the expression, and that when we're little kids we get a lot of blame because kids don't want to do their homework, and so when they don't get their homework done, they're blamed. So this this blame game is both sides in the sense that we learn to feel blame and try to resist against it when we are blamed by our parents, but we also learn how to blame from our parents. And so we go around blaming things, and then we wind up being blamed. Now, this is an old issue that's been known for so long that it's actually written exactly like that in the Bible, except that they changed a word, just one word. In the Bible, it says, "Judge not, lest ye be judged." So if you go around blaming other people, more than likely, most of that blame is internal anyway. In other words, the blamers who are blaming others go around blaming people are often blaming themselves on the inside. So the question is that when someone blames you on the outside, and then you remember that what you're doing now is you're blaming yourself or you're rubbing it in. You were blaming yourself over and over again with the trigger of someone else blamed you. So both your child, the one who is being blamed, and the parent, the blamer, now has taken over the dialogue on the inside of the mind, and the guy who originally blamed you is irrelevant. Okay. But in the course of coming to the issue about it being irrelevant, we've got to go through several stages of insight. Now, one of the things that I wanted to tell you about of the story is that there was at one time when I was being blamed by someone rejecting me as a friend, and I didn't know why. And this kind of bothered me in the sense that um, if someone blames me, the way that it had evolved over a long period of time, that if somebody blames me and I know what they're blaming me for and I understand that they're correct, then it's easy enough to thank them for pointing out the dukkha. Thank you. But if they blame and you don't know why, and they won't tell you because they're too pissed off at you to even tell you why they're pissed off or what from whatever circumstances are that way, that leaves our own mind to wonder into trying to figure out why he's blaming me or why he hates me or why he's saying nasty things on the internet or whatever the situation is. And the point is that we're not allowing him to have the same mental problems and mental disease that I myself have. But when we understand that everyone is ordinary and his blaming may in fact not be blaming me, little old me, it's just the habit of blaming that he's got. That he blames, if for all the blaming that he does for me, he probably blames himself 10,000 times more. And in that regard, I can actually have some pity and compassion for this poor guy who's blaming me all the time. Or let us say, He may have only blamed me one time, but every time I hear it in my own head and blame myself again by repeating his words, that's just more dukkha. And it's living in the past, because he only blamed me one time, and here I am remembering that 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 20 times the next day. And I just won't let it go. I keep bringing it back up and thinking about it. But it's always egocentric. We're looking at, he blamed me. What did I do wrong? This is a very selfish way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is that he's blaming me because he's in the habit of blaming. And it doesn't matter what he's blaming or who he's blaming. The issue is that he's doing the blaming himself. And this alleviates you of your responsibility. In other words, when he's blaming you, it's not your business. That's his business, blaming you. Your business is to not feel blamed. And here we are blaming ourselves. He blames us one time, and here we are blaming and blaming and blaming and blaming and blaming and trying to figure out why he's blaming.
Yeah.
So if he's blaming us and we have, and he is correct, he's blaming us for bad behaviors or whatever like that, then that's a real gift. But if he's blaming and he's blaming us falsely, because that's what we're really intending when we're not sure of why he's blaming us, we want that insurity. We want him to be wrong. Right? So we're trying to figure out why he's blaming us so that we can then defend against why he's blaming us, that he's wrong. But in fact, the issue is not whether he's right or wrong. We could go ahead and say that that's just ordinary, and that the ordinary would put that in the sense of right or wrong. The issue really is, why do I have to feel blame when someone has said blame? Why is that? The answer is, it's just an old habit. We were, when we were children, too ignorant to figure out that we are in fact blameless. Everybody's blameless. But look at all the blame that's going on. And the kids, when we're kids, we pick that up. And so this is actually nothing but an old bad habit that you have, of the habit of feeling blamed, not liking it, and wanting to defend against it by making this guy wrong or something like that. And in fact, it would be much more convenient, much more palatable, and much easier just to have compassion for this poor guy. Look how much blaming he's doing. If he's doing it on the outside, he must be doing a lot of it on the inside. Poor dude.
Yeah.
And I know how bad blame feels, because I've done enough of it in the past to know what it is. Been there, done that. That's in fact the attitude that we need to use. Is been there, done that. Okay, you've been blamed before, and you survived. You'll survive this guy blaming you if you stop thinking about it. You'll survive happily. But if you continue to think about it, then you'll survive, but you'll survive unhappily. Okay. Now, there is actually a sutta, number 22, one of my favorites. I would say it's more of one of my favorites rather than how important it is. But the name of the sutta is the simile of the snake. Talk about grabbing the Dhamma from the wrong end. And in there, in the middle section, the Buddha is talking about that I have actually been accused of things. In other words, the Buddha has been blamed. In the sutras, they talk about revering and reviling. That the Buddha has been revered, just like you have. There have been, I mean, you've been revered by your parents, you've been revered by your teachers, you've been looked up to by younger children. There has been all kinds of revering you, but you don't kind of remember that so much. But when we're blamed, that just burns and spins and burns and burns and burns, or blaming or reviling. So the Buddha first mentioned that he was reviled for his teaching of that when the body dies, the being is annihilated. Upon the breakup of the body, the being is annihilated. Now, basically, what that means is that's the ancient version of annihilationism, or the way that most people think of it when they're thinking of it in atheistic terms, in the sense that when I die, that's the end of me, right? When I die, that's the end of me. That's very, very typical, because the only option most people think is that when I die, that's not the end of me. I will be reborn into heaven or hell or a ghost or whatever like that. And so we go off into the other side of it from annihilationism, is either eternalism or semi-eternalism. And then for making it complete, the third option is what is considered nihilism, but Buddha considers nihilism absolutely wrong view. That absolutely wrong view is that there is absolutely no self. If there is absolutely no self, then one can go and do anything that he wants to do. He can kill 500 cows on this side of the river and then go and kill 500 cows on the other side of the river, is actually part of the statement that they have in the sutras. Well, guess what? That's not going to happen. India doesn't have 500 cattle just roaming around. If you have 500 cattle, you start killing them, you're going to have 500 people there trying to stop you. And if you go to the other side of the river to kill 500 cows over there, now you're going to have people crossing the river by the hundreds, as well as the people on this side of the river going to stop you. So that whole idea of getting away with it, because there is absolutely no self, is in fact the wrong view of I can get away with it. So we have nihilism, we have annihilationism, and we have eternalism. The Buddha was not accused of being an eternalist in his time, that came much later. That what he was accused of was being an atheist. He was accused of, when the breakup of the body, the existing being is annihilated. And the Buddha says, no, that's not what we teach. And in fact, what he teaches is the Nietzsche, or temporarianism. In other words, the self rises and then it passes away, and it arises and it passes away. But it doesn't arise at the time of the baby's born or sometime in childhood and then remain until the person dies. That's the idea of a personality. Okay. Now, the Buddha then says that people have reviled me, but just because they have reviled me by accusing me on that case, for that reason, there is no dejection or dropping of the heart. And if they revere me, there is no elation of the heart. And then he says, and the reason for this is because such things have been seen before, and I got over them. Okay. This is basically that statement that I use often, been there, done that. You have, in fact, been blamed before. You were blamed throughout your childhood. You were blamed when you were in high school. You were blamed before you got this job, and you're blamed on this job. What's the deal? You've been blamed before. You got over it.
That's a good point.
That's a very good point the Buddha is making. Exactly. That we have been reviled, we have been blamed, and that blaming is in fact coming from that source for reasons of the source. That in fact the Buddha was falsely accused. The people who were accusing him of being an atheist were in fact the eternalists who were dead set against him. That he taught against eternalism. And that was very clear in the time of the Buddha. And so they accused him of teaching atheism, which he did not teach. And they reviled him for teaching Buddhism, which he did not teach. He was falsely, wrongly, baselessly accused. But on that account, there was no dejection of the heart. What do we mean by the dejection of the heart? That means mulling it over, running over it, trying to figure it out. Oh, he's picked my balloon with his needle, and now I'm deflated. Dejection. Whoa. Okay. He burst your bubble. And in many cases, we want retaliation. How dare you deflate my bubble by criticizing me, by blaming? Okay. Well, let me ask you this way then. For all the times that you actually out loud and with your voice, and maybe even with your accusatory finger pointing, how often do you blame other people for anything? Once a day? Twice a day? Once a week?
I don't think I do it that often.
Not much, right? How many times do you blame yourself on the inside with thoughts?
Pretty frequently in the last day or so.
Yeah, a lot. Especially when we've got an opportunity, when there's a trigger there, when an event happens that we have a lot of bad feelings about. But if he is blaming you and you feel no dejection of the heart, then the likelihood of you continuing that dialogue of him blaming you again in your own mind, and you have the dejection of the heart in your own mind, and then you have rebellion against that dejection of the heart, and you see that cycle going. But that cycle was kicked off from the first time it happened. But if you were very sharp and alert and recognizing that this is just blame coming from a blaming mind, rather than, oh, he's wounded me with his blame. So this is a way that the selfishness comes in, that in fact is almost like each human being is out on the rifle range, not where the people are the shooting guns. He's out there with the targets. Every one of us is out there with the targets. Not only are we with the targets, but we stand in front of the targets, hoping that those stray blames and stray shells will hit me. That's selfishness. In other words, I'll take any bullets, I'll take any blame, I'll take any attention at all. Because being paid attention to is better than nothing at all. That's a very selfish attitude. And basically what it happens is that it's better to have, you've heard this expression, it's better to have loved and to lost than to have never loved at all. You've heard that? Who says that kind of thing? Losers. Yeah. Right? The ones who expected to lose. Okay? Yeah. That in fact, the loving loser is actually the one who receives the blame. It's better to go around loving things and then losing it, is that attitude. But the Buddha's attitude is, hey man, if you don't love stuff, it don't hurt you when it hits you back. If you don't love something, you haven't lost anything. Well, this whole issue of the blame is that I love me, and he's attacking a me in there, and that me is a very important thing to me. And because it's me, it is precious. He should not be blaming me. He should be reviling me or revering me, putting me up there on the high place where I belong. Right?
Right.
But we're actually expecting them now to be better than I am. We want him to stop blaming me and start revering me when I'm sitting here continuing to blame myself.
Mm.
Right? If you want revering, you've got to do it yourself. That elation of the heart and the digestion of the heart is up to you. It's not up to the blamer. Now, let's go back a bit, because this is kind of important. I originally mentioned to you that I was reading a book by Edward Conch, published in 1959. The name of the book is A Short History of Buddhism. It's not a big, thick book, but he is a scholar, a westernized scholar. And so whenever he's talking about what the Buddha actually taught, he's making a whole bunch of mistakes. Okay. An example of that is when the Buddha talks about the deathless, or when even Christianity talks about the sting of death, that death has no sting. What the Christians are talking about is that when Jesus died, he was resurrected, which meant that he had victory over death because death couldn't kill him, right? Which meant that in that regard, he that he was fearless in the face of death, because death has no sting. Okay. Now that's not the same thing as that death has no existence, but rather that death has no sting. Now, what we mean by that is that fearlessness is being fearlessness in the face of death. Even if the death faces you down and gets you, there's still nothing to fear. And so fearlessness in the face of death, or the deathless, is more about not that you don't die, that you're immortal, but rather that you can live a life that's free from fear because you're not afraid to die. But Christians miss that. So this is one of the major points that Kant has missed, but he made a lot of other mistakes. But the reason that I'm bringing him up is because it looks like that, at least in the historical perspective, he's got a lot of stuff right. That the Western historians can put things together. So where the Asians, they kind of mix everything in. Doesn't really matter when things happen. But Kant breaks Buddhism into four groups. And brings them about in about 500 years apart, or let us say now that's been 5 times 500 years, but he lists the last 1,000 together. I think that was just poor research on his part. But he's basically breaking down into 500 years here, there, and yon. And he says that in the first group, the ideal within the religion was the arahat. And the arahat is the one who gets his own mind cleaned out. So Kant is right on that. And he said in the second period, which actually started in India, though it looks like that it is the Mahayana is outside of India, but it actually started in India, and that the second period is what he refers to, and many people understand it to be, the Bodhisattva period. The Bodhisattva ideal is that no one can become enlightened, or I cannot become enlightened until everybody else is enlightened. I have to stand at the gate and keep helping people to come in. And only after everybody else is enlightened, then I can become enlightened. Well, you see what a loser's mentality that is, because you can't enlighten anybody else. The only one you've got a chance of doing is enlighten your own mind. And here we are wasting our time trying to enlighten others. And so the whole ideal of the Bodhisattva ideal is based upon, let us say, a sandy, not rock solid foundation.
Yeah.
But then the third period in Conch's book is the one that makes so much sense. And this is the time about 1,000 years after the Buddha, which we can actually place some of the Buddhist literature there. And that's where the Visuddhimagga starts. About 500 AD is when Conch talks about it being in the tantric phase. This is when the Arahat in the first phase becomes the Bodhisattva in the second phase. In the third phase, in the tantric phase, this is where the ideal becomes one with everything, mergers with everything, that he becomes part of the whole, but in the process, he begins to control it. This is the idea of where magic comes in, that Conch, who is a Western scholar and is looking at it from a historical perspective, says, and I can understand this, that magic did not come into Buddhism for 1,000 years. But when it did come in, it came in and it's been there now for 1,500 years. So magic is very, very well established in the religion of Buddhism, but it evolved into that. But it didn't evolve everywhere, but rather that the actual teachings of the Buddha of getting one's own mind straightened out appeals always to a select group of people. You got to be pretty intelligent. You got to be pretty smart to figure out that our enemies are us. That's hard to figure out. And for that reason, most people don't ever figure it out, and they always look at the enemy or the boss or the authority or whatever is on the outside. And that authority winds up being so powerful that it's either the law of karma or it's the law of karma with a name and a face, like a god or an Allah. Okay, that's nothing but a personality of the grand karma machine, which you don't have any control over. So back to that point about the Buddha being accused. Now he's being accused of, in modern times, of being an eternalist. He was never accused of being an eternalist in his own lifetime.
He was accused of being an atheist or a
He was
nihilist.
being an atheist in his lifetime.
Yeah.
But now in modern times, he's accused of being an eternalist with all his rebirth stuff. And also accused of having magical power, to where the real power is contentment and happiness. That's the real power, the power of safety and security. But if I got a huge fortune, that huge fortune is not going to make me feel safe. It's going to make me feel insecure, because now not only do I have to take care of myself, but I got to take care of this fortune too. After all, that fortune is mine.
Mm-hmm.
There is that story about the prince and the pauper. Have you heard of that story? It's actually been made into several movies as well as the book. The story is about a young kid who is a street urchin, very, very streetwise. And that because of birthmarks or tattoos or something, the story goes is that the king has been looking for the long-lost prince, who happened to have been the same age. And this kid is identified as being the long-lost prince. The guards take him to the palace, dress him in fine clothes, and guard him, etc., like this. And this young prince being streetwise as he was, longs for his freedom, and he eventually escapes the palace and goes back out on the street, because there he's got a whole lot more freedom, and he's not so valuable, he's not so important, and because of that he's not guarded by the guards.
Sounds like
Okay,
sounds
so
like
here
something I
we
can
are,
relate
all
to.
street urchins,
Yeah.
thinking that we want to be princes living in the palace and having a lot of money, and not recognizing that that's a prison. It may be a golden cage, it may be a gilded cage, but it's a cage. And a lot of people will say, "Oh well, I'll be happy in that cage," and then they don't. Okay, sometimes they're called gold diggers. Sometimes these gold diggers actually marry the absolute worst guy that they could, and their life is miserable, ere how lucky and fortunately they look. An example of that is the previous First Lady, Melania Trump, right?
Yeah.
She thought when she married him that she was going to be well off and lucky and all of that kind of stuff, and she's wound up being miserable.
Yeah.
That's the greed that we have. And so if we come back to understand that um, the baggage that we carry, including our own wealth and our own, let us say, deflector shield, winds up being very heavy. What I mean by a deflector shield is that there's going to be blame shot in your direction from all kinds of places. That the whole society is built upon critical thinking and blaming. So you're not going to escape getting blamed.
Yeah.
But you can escape repeating it inside your own mind. You could give that blame to someone else. Let them do it. That
Yeah.
for us, everything is all right. Everything's fine. Even their blame is okay. That in fact you are a moving target, and so you could just slip out of the way, and that blame can go. I saw that one. Okay,
Yeah.
this is what the Buddha is going back to, that meaning of been there, done that. Now that you've gotten that, I mean, we know for sure you have now been blamed. No getting around it. But you were probably already blamed before he blamed you. But for some reason, we decided that this blame is a new blame. And I got to behave with this blame the way that I've always dealt with being blamed. And that is that I got to stand right up there and get shot right in the chest. Why? We want to get shot in the chest. So then we can get all justified and everything. How dare you shoot me in the chest?
Yeah.
But a much better way of looking at it is that all his blame didn't mean anything because he missed. He didn't get me.
Yeah.
In that sense, it's like, do your worst. Okay, you did your worst, and that's all there is. You can't get to me because there's no me here. You missed it.
Wow, that's great.
So if we could do that in that present moment when the person is actually blaming you, you can be finished with it right there. There's nothing left. That in fact, we've talked about it in the sense of post-traumatic stress disorder. So the event when he blamed you was stressful in that moment. The next day, when you're thinking about it, is post-traumatic stress disorder. Why? Because it's after the stress, it's still traumatic, And it's a pretty disorderly thing to do to yourself. But in fact, what we should look for instead is post-traumatic stress
Relief.
order.
Stress relief.
Right, or stress order, that we're going to order that stress finish.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
not stressful. That it was only stressful, number one, because we thought it was, and number two, he wanted it to be stressful. He intended to stress you out, and you let him do that. Yeah, go ahead, hurt me.
Yeah. That's a good point.
When we recognize that we have a choice about whether we're going to get hit or not, when we have a choice, when we know that we've got a choice, then you can stand out of the way. You didn't even recognize that you had a choice. And the second day, you didn't recognize that you had a choice. And so when we start thinking about it, we don't recognize we've got a choice. Just because he hurt me yesterday doesn't mean that I got to continue to hurt myself today. But we do that with the sense of, oh, if I can figure out why he was blaming me, then I cannot do that which he was blaming me for. So next time I won't get blamed. Right? I mean, that's the typical employee relationship. Is the employer goes around blaming people, hoping that he can get more money from them, or making them work harder or better or smarter or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, when blame happens, first on the outside, are you going to wake up to it and recognizing, oh, he doesn't have to hit me. This does not have to be a trauma. I don't have to stand and get shot. And even if I do, tomorrow when I start thinking about it, I can say, hey, now I don't have to feel blame. That I can allow that guy to just have his own blame game. That's his business. He is not my business.
Yeah.
So this is a really valuable place of looking. The Buddha had a major, major teaching with that. Been there, done that. Okay, I've been blamed before, and I've survived. I can get over this one too. And if I'm blaming myself in my own mind, then I can recognize I can put a stop to that immediately. Everything's okay. Everything's fine. What happened yesterday was yesterday. Out of sight, out of mind. Just forget all about it.
Yeah.
And then some people say, wait a minute, if I'm blamed and I don't do what I need to do, then I'll get blamed again and blamed again and blamed again. And the answer to that is, and your job is to never get blamed again. If that's the case, then why do we continue to blame ourselves on the inside, hoping to get our mind up to scratch so that others don't blame us so much, when in fact we're doing all that blaming to get ready to not get blamed? That doesn't make a lot of sense. So if you want to avoid blame, stop blaming yourself.
Okay.
Stop trying to fix things that aren't broken. Everything's already okay.
Yeah.
Even when somebody's blaming you, that's just something that's happening in his mind. And all we have to do is remember that. That's sati for you. This is part of the reason why I bring it up in the regard of Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and it'll go wrong at the worst possible moment, right? We've heard that before. Okay. What that means is just living your life and walking around, there's going to be blame. People are going to blame you. It's going to happen.
Yep. But we've been blamed before, so.
You've been blamed before. You're going to get blamed again. The question is, are you going to be there for it? Are you going to be ready for it? Are you going to remember that blame is out there? And if we can remember, we can be on guard for it. So that when it comes up, aha, I see you finally. There you are.
Yeah.
So this is the way of looking at it then, is been there, done that. And because I have been there and I have dealt with blame and I have had, let us say, a lot of pain because of a lot of blame, if I stop the blame, then I'll stop the pain. For that reason, I'm going to be on guard for it. Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong, blame, will go wrong. I'll get blamed just at the worst possible moment when I need to be blamed. When I've screwed up, I'm going to get blamed for it.
Yeah.
But the point is not that you have to go around and not ever screwing up, because screwing up is somebody else's opinion. The question is that after I'm blamed, am I going to screw up again by feeling blamed and having to defend myself? Murphy's Law. Okay, to remember, wakey, wakey, you're going to get blamed. When you do, enjoy that you can catch it.
Let it go right by
Not
you.
only that, but you also kind of know who it is that's in the habit of blaming people. Some people blame others more than others. Some people are in the habit of blaming a lot. But anybody who blames others a lot, you can pretty well count on that they're doing a lot of blaming on the inside also. But in any case, once you've been around for a while, you know who's most likely to blame, which means that whenever you're around them, be on guard. Be on guard. You know, like blame 5 seconds ahead, you see this guy walking down the hall, and you know that he's a blamer, so you be on guard. Aha, I see that. This is where sati now becomes really important. Can you wake up in time so that you can handle the worst disasters? Because getting blamed is not the worst thing that's going to happen to you. But if you can get ready for blame so that when people blame you, you're good to go, then you can handle many things.
Yeah.
That in fact, blame is often considered an attack. So Murphy's Law can then be restated that any attack that can happen, will happen, is going to be happening when you're not watching. So if you're watching, you don't get attacked.
Mm.
The slings and arrows of outrageous fortune do not have to land home if you're watching. But here you did, you caught that arrow not in your hand and threw it down, you caught it in your chest. And then yesterday, and the next day, you keep pulling that arrow out and stabbing yourself with it again, over and over again. And that's what we mean by post-traumatic stress disorder. That once we get into stress, we begin to behave like that stress is there, when in fact it's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're not under stress if you don't get hit right. And you've been under stress before, now you know how to dodge. Been there, done that. You've been reviled before, and you got dejection of the heart before. Now you could be reviled, and it's not you that's being reviled. It's just this guy that's doing the reviling is reviling because he's in the habit of reviling. Poor dude.
Yeah. Exactly.
So there's no reason to revile him back. He already knows how to do that himself.
Yeah.
And so that issue about what did I do wrong? Why is he blaming me? Why does he hate my guts? The answer to that is it's not your business. It's not your business. I've learned to forgive myself for all the really terrible, stupid things that I'm doing. If he doesn't want to forgive me for that, that's his business.
Mm-hmm.
More than likely, though, if you go back a week later and remind him of that conversation, he won't remember it. And if he does, he won't remember it at all the way that you remember it. And if you're both unlucky, you both will reenact it. And both of you feel bad again.
Yeah.
So it's better just to let it go. Forget about it.
Okay.
So this is how we handle blame, and it's going to happen. People are going to blame you because they're in the habit of blaming. And in fact, the thing that's really interesting is that the ones that they want to blame are the ones that they put up on the pedestal as a target anyway. I mean, they intentionally blame the people that they're jealous of. So if somebody winds up blaming you, that means that he's giving you a whole lot of respect. Why should somebody go way out of their way to revile the Buddha? Unless they already had quite a bit of respect in there someplace anyway that they were jealous of. So that's an example that you can use for yourself, that when people are blaming you, that's possibly because they're jealous.
Yeah, I think so.
And that's something that we can also mention, that on the spiritual path, those who gain, let us say, the advantage of the Dhamma, they do become a target. They do become a target because they begin to show things that other people don't have, like joy, happiness, no dejection of the heart when they're being blamed, and other things like that. And so people will naturally become jealous of seeing these characteristics in a person that they don't have. That's one of the things that I have recognized from time to time, not daily and not moment by moment, but from time to time, I've recognized that people do hold me in a state that winds up being jealous. And so it's not necessarily that I go around being reviled a lot, but jealousy itself is easy enough to see. And so as you grow, mature, and become bright and shiny, there's going to be people who are jealous of that. There in fact will be people who see you better than you see yourself, and they hate you for it.
Mm.
They will hate you because you're better than they are, and they know it. But you're not actually better than they are. You're just having a ball. They're the ones who are doing the comparison.
Yeah, I can see
And
that.
quite often it will wind up being the blame game. They will go around intentionally looking for something wrong with you so that they can point that out so that they don't have to feel in awe of you.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so basically what that means is that when they go and prick your balloon, it was their balloon that they blew up in their own mind anyway that they're pricking. It is not you at all. Unless you want to go stand in front of that target while they're pricking.
No.
So this is how we can handle criticism. It's actually quite easy to handle criticism when you recognize what criticism actually is. It's a how to say it? It's a reaction to people actually being in reverence of you. So they revile you. When you look at it like that, it's like, okay, let them blame, no problem. Thank you very much. I'll have another dose of that.
Do your worst, yeah.
So this is all again a matter of attitude. Going back to the point that, in fact, if they can't hit you, if they didn't take a shot and missed, then that proves at that point that you do have the power of the mind to stand out of the way, that you do have that power, you do have that attitude, the attitude of a winner, the attitude of can't touch me. You've heard that song, you know? Yeah, can't touch me. Well, if he can't touch you, even though he's doing his worst, he's actually, because he can't touch you, he's not doing anything wrong. So there's no reason to hold a grudge against him at all.
Yeah.
He's failed. He failed at trying to be bad, and he's not able to be bad because he couldn't hurt me. Can't touch me. So that's the attitude that you would have then. But the attitude is, oh, he blamed me. Oh, what did I do wrong? Oh, I've got to go suck up and all of that kind of stuff. But if he blames you and you catch it and you are not stabbed by his arrow, then you have that champion attitude. Can't touch me.
Yeah.
That's that winner's attitude. That's bringing that power. That's real power. The power of being invincible to language. It doesn't matter what anybody says to you, they can't hurt you. Only you can hurt you. Only you could grab their arrow that they shot at you, grab it out of the air, and then stab yourself with it.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't even matter whether they're right or wrong. If they are right, thank you very much. You've told me something, and now I'll have even less dukkha. Thank you very much. But if you don't know why they're angry at you, or they're not correct, then that's no reason to try to defend ourselves. We don't need to defend. Because they weren't able to get to you anyway. They gave you a gift instead.
Yep.
So it's all about attitude. Seeing what they said as a gift, recognizing I've been there before, I've done that, can handle this. That his blaming in on outside to me is just an indication that he's blaming himself a lot anyway. And you know that because you do it yourself. For all the people that you blame yourself a whole lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that means that we can have compassion and joy for these guys, even when they're reviling, criticizing, blaming. And you can handle that. You've been blamed before and you're good. No problem. You can handle blame by stepping right out of the way of it. Let it go by. Not me, not mine.
Yeah.
So now we can say, all right, I'm going to buck up. I want to be on guard because I am not going to be able to live my life without blame. There is no such. In fact, the Buddha talks about it like this: blame, that we don't do things that are worthy of blame by the wise. In other words, if someone who is wise, they will find things also to blame. And it's when the wise man blames you, then he's probably correct, and we should be grateful and thankful for the wise man's blames, because he's going to tell us something that we actually would benefit by hearing. But the wise people then often don't blame other wise people. There's no need to. What the wise man has to deal with is the blame that comes from fools.
Yeah.
That's the blame that you have to deal with. But when you recognize the source of the blame, then it's much easier to deal with. That this is not wise blame. Wise blame is very, very rare.
Mm.
And it's a gift. Like when, for instance, if Achan Plo blames me for something, I listen. Because I trust what he has to say. But ordinary people out in the world, their blame is because they're in the habit of blaming. And you get blamed because you're in the habit of getting blamed. That's wakey, wakey.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's recognize that he's not blaming me. He's just blaming. That's his mind. So that guy, the one who blames, and you know which one's blamed. So be on guard when they come up, when you're in contact with them. Aha, I saw that one. Ah, he said that too. I got that. And you keep that winner's attitude. You can't touch you.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, this is kind of something that is not taught normally within the Buddhist context, because we're supposed to be all humble and whatever like that. But this is not humble. Humble is, in fact, the one who slinks away when he's blamed.
Mm.
The prideful one is going to stand up and fight. But we're just going to, okay. Missed that one.
Yeah.
So you try that. Go around looking for people to blame you, because they will. Especially the more spiritual growth you have, the more of a target you will become. Just because you're free from jealousy doesn't mean everybody's going to be free from jealousy. That bodhisattva stuff don't work.
That's a good point.
Right? You got to be the arahant here. You got to just stand and say, you missed me. Because there's no me here.
Got it.
Gotcha. That's excellent. So we don't have to go to having great power, magical power, to defend ourselves against the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. That in fact, all of that body armor of power is slowing us down. That we don't need that kind of power. All we need is agility instead, an agile mind. Just to step out of the way.
Mm.
So that's the real spell. There is real spiritual power. But people have been, through religions, trying to gain magical power. But magical power is more of an issue of greed, of wanting something that you don't have. And in almost all cases, power, in the ordinary sense of the word, people want power so that they can abuse other people. The power to harm, the power to hurt. That's what real power is. What is the military? What's military power? Of nothing but the power over people, the power to hurt them. That's what police is. The police power is the power to harm people, to hurt them. That's what power is all about. What is magical power then, other than the same kind of power? The power over other people. And so that's a very big, dangerous thing for people to want magical power, to be a Gandalf. Right? That's the way that we begin to see things. And you can see from the story that I told you about Edward Kuntz, is that that was part of the evolution of Buddhism, which was to actually take something that was extraordinarily valuable and start layering it with stuff that was ordinary. That you could, in fact, see that the teaching of metta, which is very early in the teachings of the Buddha, but the teachings of metta is what became the Bodhisattva ideal. Is let's have enough metta here, folks, and if we can have enough metta, then everybody will be happy. And then I can be happy finally too, because everybody else is. All right. So it's based upon metta, but then the next phase is based upon power. And so it goes from wisdom to metta to power. That's the degeneration that Buddhism has gone through. But guess what? Even though it's gone through those phases, there have been pockets and areas of Buddhism that did not evolve. They've remained the same. They've kept close to the actual teachings of the Buddha. That yes, we do practice metta, but we practice metta because there's nothing else to do with people once we have metta on the inside. That's the right way to look at it. Is that we need to get our act cleaned up so that we actually can at least help people by giving them metta, rather than hanging out lonely and woefully waiting on everybody else to get enlightened so I can get enlightened too. Better thing to do is go ahead and get it done, and then at least you can laugh and smile at those who don't get it done.
Yeah.
And so these are the phases that Buddhism has gone through. Let's get back to the original teaching. Let's not go for power. Let's not go for trying to get everybody else fixed up so that I'll feel good, or go for the power of it. If I can't use metta to liberate everybody, then I can make them, because I've got the power of the universe. I can control things, and so I'll make them feel happy. Then I'll be happy. And the answer to all of that is no. That power comes because you are already liberated. Power will not bring liberation. Power brings prison. But if you're already liberated, that liberation brings power. That liberation brings metta. It's not to be practiced, it's a result. If you're completely happy, then you're going to be happy with other people. That's it.
Yeah.
So this is the way to practice. Get that mind straightened out. Watch, be on guard. Blame, 5 seconds ahead.
Okay. I'm going to do
See
that.
it when it's coming. Know how to dodge. So I think that we figured out what blame is all about.
Yes. I think I got it.
Yeah, you don't have to be blamed anymore. You can, in fact, the real way of behaving now, from now on, is anytime that you recognize that you are blaming anyone in your own mind, or anytime that you are blaming you, catch those critical thoughts. Recognize that everything is already okay. I don't have to blame anybody to get things the way I want it. It's already the best it could be.
Okay.
But especially don't repeat other people's blame for you. Just because they blamed you doesn't mean you've got to keep blaming you, keep stabbing yourself at that same arrow.
Yeah.
It's really funny when we say it like that, but that's what we do. Why did he blame me? Why doesn't he like me? Poor me. So let's not be so judgmental. Let's not be so critical. Let's not be so blaming.
Okay.
Let people who blame, blame. As Jesus would say, let the dead bury the dead. Let the blamers blame each other.
Yep. I like that one.
And you're out of it. There's no you there. Well, this has been a really fun conversation. I've liked this.
This is great.
Yeah.
I'm glad
If
I
you
brought it
didn't
up.
get anything out of it, don't blame me.
This is what I needed.
Right.
It's great. Can I see one thing after we end this video here?
Yes, let's go ahead and finish this video.
Okay. Great.